Okay, so continuing on with selections, using the brush tool, quick masking. Let's cover that real quick. There is an option for quick masking. I find that, oh wait, let me open up a new file. And coincidentally, what's going to happen if I click and drag this radio JPEG into here? It's going to create a smart object. Yes, it is. So I'm going to open up that file in here. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do this. What have I done wrong? I have just done something very wrong. I'm holding down the shift key actually, but good, that's a good point. If I wasn't holding down the shift key, I'd be doing that very wrong. I have created pixels. Let me redo that. Oops. You know what? I messed a step. I'm sorry. Let me redo that real quick. And I'll make this bigger. I'm holding down Shift and Alt, by the way, together. Up here at the top is some very important information. Please don't jump mouse. Please don't jump mouse. Okay, good. Very important information. You have a little tiny bit of flexibility in increasing these files. When you drop a file in for the first time, it will create it at the size that it's at. This is the size of the file, the JPEG that's here. I can maybe make it a little bit bigger, maybe 110. I'm kind of pushing it at 117. The other thing is there's this lock icon. I recommend that you go ahead and lock it. It's the same thing as holding down the shift key. You could do it that way too. It's up to you. As long as these two numbers are the same and aren't above 110%, you're pretty good. But remember, we don't want to pixelate our images. We don't want to create that. Remember that pixelated cat? Remember how bad it looked? It would look so much sharper. It would look so much better if it had the proper resolution. But anyway, I don't need this at full size. I'm going to go ahead and hide these other two. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm in transform mode. I've got to hit enter. So I'm going to go ahead and hide these two layers by clicking the icons, and then I've just got this guy. I'll grab my move tool so I can kind of move it around. The nice thing about smart objects though is that if I do resize things, I can resize it as many times as I want. So if you do accidentally oversize it, you can always just bring it back down. If you have a layer that's not a smart object, do not resize it a whole bunch of times. It doesn't work out very well. But anyway, that will also create some bad pixelization. So for this one, I have a pretty good background here. I'm going to let's try the Tragic Wand tool. The Tragic Wand tool only has one variable to it, that's tolerance. That you really need to worry about. Anti-aliasing, sample all layers. Actually I take it back, sample all layers. Sometimes you want it to, the selection tools will only select what active layer you have. Sometimes you want it to select multiple layers at the same time, or rather select multiple layers down. So if I had sample all layers, what Tragic Wand will try to do is see how it boxed out that it will try to select things in multiple layers, if that makes sense. Whereas if I uncheck sample all layers, it's just going to do that one layer. All right, and we pretty immediately see, I'll go ahead and create a layer mask just to make it very clear for everyone. You know what, I selected it backwards, but at this stage, all I have to do is hit that Command key, Command I to invert. Happens all the time, just Command I. And we see here, wow, I've created a bunch of transparency where I didn't want. This is why the Tragic Wand is called the Tragic Wand, because it does solid colors really well, or very solid whites, but notice that like right here, it's not really a solid color. I probably would like to select more of the shadow and get rid of it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. It's also decided that, oh yeah, I'm going to select all these pixels in here. Now, what I could do is change my tolerance value. I'm going to lower it to, let's try 10. And that fixed this part right here. But it's starting to get like the rest of the radio. So another thing I can do is if I hold down with any selection tool, here's some really important things with any selection tool. The Shift key will add to a selection. So you can continuously add to a selection. So I can keep clicking in here and add to my selection. Does that make sense? I can also subtract from any selection by holding down the Alt key. Notice it gets a little minus sign. And I honestly don't know how I would get this, because whenever I use the Tragic Wand tool here, it tends to grab a bunch of these edges and not very well. I could kind of keep going down the tolerance, but then I'm going to keep deselecting more and more of the shadow, which creates more and more work for me to have to kind of click in here and get all these little spots. This is something very, very common with the wand tool. I don't know if it's very visible, but there's like a little tiny selection here. There's like little bumps everywhere because these pixels just didn't happen to be within the same tolerance value. That's why it's called the Tragic Wand. The quick selection tool will probably make quick work of this, I would think. It works very much like a brush and has hardness and softness. Very, very often with the quick selection tool, and you can hit the bracket keys just like with a brush and make it bigger and smaller. Very, very often, notice how that it has selected too much, right? It has selected some parts that I don't want it to select. You're going to find yourself going back and forth with this tool by holding down the Alt key and subtracting from the selection. And then going, maybe adding to the selection as well. So by holding down, actually I think by default this tool will add. I don't think you need to hold the Shift key. No, you don't need to hold the Shift key. It's kind of redundant with this tool. So it kind of got it. It's not doing a terrific job. Maybe I might try out auto. There is an auto enhance checkbox. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to do it any better. So the advantages and disadvantages of the Tragic Wand. It only can do very, very solid color. Sometimes it does a really good job at skies, things like that. White background, sometimes it can get, but then again, there's a shadow here. The quick selection tool, it's worth a shot in almost every situation. That's the nice thing about the quick selection tool. Try it on everything, because if it doesn't work, it's going to be pretty obvious very early on. And it's not going to consume a bunch of your time. All right, the marquee tools. There's one thing that I didn't cover that's kind of a difficult concept to quite grab at first. But once you start doing it, it becomes really easy. If you ever need to select eyes, and this is the way that I selected these eyes, and you can see I created a mask out of them. And I think I must have messed with the mask for some reason, but whatever. Initially, I created this mask. Let me show you what I did. I used the best part of the marquee tool. Watch what I'm going to do. I'm going to shift and drag, and I'm only going to worry. I know it's a little bit hard to see on the projector, but what I'm doing is I'm placing the dotted line, and I'm holding down the space bar, which lets me move it around. I'm placing the dotted line so that the top edge is correct. I'm not going to worry about the bottom edge just yet. This is an awesome way to select eyes, by the way, because you can get really fast with this. Now, one of the things that you can do with your selection tools, you can add and subtract. You can also intersect, which means that I can click, if I hold down Shift and Alt together, I will intersect the selection. What that means is I'm going to click and drag another selection, and this time I'm only going to worry about the bottom part of the eye. I know it's kind of hard to see on the projector, but the bottom line is sort of, I'll move it around so it's a little bit easier to see. That bottom line is roughly on the bottom part of the eye. And I'm holding down Shift and Alt right now. What intersect will do is it will only select where both of the selections overlap. When I let go, now I have a selection. Let me, you know what, let me throw away this mask right quick just so we can see a little better. And then create a selection out of that. And then, Do you guys see the kind of shape I was able to form? And I could keep going too with that. Let me undo a few times. I can now go in. Let's say I didn't quite get exactly what I wanted. I could intersect, let's see. Probably, you know what, with this one, I don't think I would add, actually I don't think I would be doing Shift or Alt with this one. What I could do on the other hand, here's another thing you can do. I feel like I'm giving you just like way too much information. You can transform a selection in the same way you transformed pixels. And I can drag this selection out. I can even kind of contort. If you hold down with the with any of the transform, if you hold down the Command key and click one of these corners, I can drag out that corner more independently and kind of contort the selection a little bit and get it just right. Now I might go back in with the brush tool and get it just right, which is probably what I did here. And kind of just kind of brush with a fairly hard edge brush because the edges of the photo were fairly hard, but stuff like that. And you can do this with the elliptical. You can do this with any tool. If I wanted to go back in here and add to the selection with the quick selection tool, you can mix and match tools as much as you want. Everything can add and subtract selections from one another, except it just selected everything or something. I don't know what I did. I'll undo that. Maybe I'll go in here with the quick selection tool and try to get that little bit there. Except it keeps deselecting. That's weird. Oh, because I don't have sample all layers checked, I think. And I'm in a layered group. Yeah, that's what it was. I didn't have sample all layers. Be aware of which layer you have active, or just simply check sample all layers. Just kind of depends on what you're working on. All right. Any questions about anything I've talked about so far? Adding and subtracting selections. If you guys want yet another way to think about masks and selections, everything is connected. Masks, channels, right? Masks, channels, and selections are all the same thing because I can convert a selection into a channel at any time by simply going to select, where is it? Select, save selection. So I'm going to save my selection right now. Let's call this radio, I guess. But Mike, where did it save it to? I didn't see any change. But if I go to my channels palette, aha, there is my selection. And if I kind of hide it, but what does my selection look exactly like? It looks exactly like a mask. But it's in the channels palette. I can command click this thumbnail, just like that. Any thumbnail that you see, you can command click and it'll create a selection out of it. And if you ever see this red Rubylith overlay, it simply means that that alpha channel is visible. I just need to hide it, like so. Kind of just shows you, it's just an overlay to show you what that mask looks like. It's not actually there. But once you think about how it saves your alpha channel, you can go in here and start to make changes to the alpha channel and build things differently, and then make a selection out of that, and then now that becomes your layer mask. Of course, I screwed it up, but you know, of course, I need to invert it too. A lot of different ways to work. And getting to know at least a few of these, don't feel like you have to know every single way of doing everything. Not really important. Get a few of these down. I really recommend the quick selection tool, the lasso tool, and the brush. Those three are pretty handy. Now, let me... I'm getting the sense that you guys are pretty tired of me talking, so let's take a quick break. 10 minutes this time, so